At a press conference today, authorities confirmed DNA evidence links Edward Alemany to Amy Lord's murder. But Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis says forensic evidence is only the beginning.
This is not just a DNA case. This is a case that involves a significant amount of different types of evidence.
Just months after the Boston Marathon bombings, a case he calls the most complex of his career, Davis remains in the spotlight.
I am satisfied that we are in the right place and we have the right person.
That was Davis Monday at a community meeting in South Boston. Hundreds turned out to voice their concerns in the wake of Lord's murder.
This isn't about drugs. It's about violence against women.
Just getting home late at night and nobody really being awake and, I don't know, getting attacked.
Lord's death has raised other questions for Boston police. Davis recently demoted a detective for failing to follow up on a case last year involving Alemany. Also confronting Davis, the escalating number of shootings in the city, which are up over 20% from last year. And it's made public safety and Davis's job a hot topic in this year's mayoral race. And Commissioner Ed Davis is here. Welcome.
Thank you, Jared.
So as Dan Conley said today, the DA, and as we just saw you say in that piece, this is a very complex case. How is it complex, given that he was, taken into custody relatively quickly, and the leads have led to him all along?
Well, there were three separate incidents that occurred, one right after the other, in South Boston. The young lady that was murdered, Amy Lord, was kidnapped and taken out of South Boston into Hyde Park. And because of all the activity that occurred there, and her vehicle was torched at the end of that assault and brought back to South Boston and burned, there's a significant amount of evidence that has to be collected in South Boston, at her home, at the ATM places that she was brought in the vehicle, as well as at the scene out in Hyde Park where her body was found. So all of that collection of evidence and processing of evidence takes time and is complex.
Going back to that South Boston meeting you had the other night, obviously people are very, very concerned. Women in particular are concerned. What fundamentally did you glean from that meeting? What did you take away from sort of fears that people have in this city at this point?
Well, the first thing I've learned, and it's not the first time I've learned it, but Southie is a very cohesive neighborhood. It's a place where neighbors take care of neighbors. People who have lived there for generations feel very much at home, and a whole slew of new people who have moved into the neighborhood are coming together around this tragedy and working with us to make sure that this type of thing doesn't happen again. That's the first thing I learned. The other thing I learned was that people were afraid. I mean, this touched people. This is the type of random crime that doesn't happen often in our city. And so when we see this, we need to do everything we can to assure people that they have nothing to fear, and that we'll do everything we can to keep this guy in custody.
And what about this notion, this fear that if there is an assault of this magnitude, or even of a lesser magnitude, where it doesn't result in this horrific death, that it might not be dealt with by the Boston police as effectively as people would like?
Well, this is an aberration. We've looked into the conduct that occurred here. This is not what people should expect. And
you're referring to the detective.
What happened with the detective, right? The way the assault that occurred in 2012, the way that was handled. I have tremendous detectives out there, and as evidenced by the work that was done by Paul McLaughlin and his team in investigating this homicide. This was put together very, very quickly for such a complex case. That's the kind of work we're used to in Boston. That's the kind of work that people should expect, and we've taken steps to make sure that the mistakes that were made don't get made again.
Yeah, you say it was an aberration, but people are wondering, how could this possibly happen? So what steps have been taken, and how were his supervisors not aware that he wasn't following up as he should have been?
Well, we've taken appropriate and immediate action against the detective after looking at the facts and circumstances. We have abundant evidence that he did not follow through properly. There's an ongoing probe into what his supervisors did. That's taking some time because people have been away on vacation, and we're trying to get them back in and question them.
So you are trying to bring them back, because I know that's a concern among people too, is it doesn't matter if they're on vacation, they should be answering now.
Right. Well, we have to get them here, and actually, the detectives union today talked a little bit about wanting this probe to move quickly so that we could get all the facts out on the table as to the supervision. So that's ongoing right now. The other thing is sort of a look at an administrative review of all the cases, all the open cases that we have in the city, to make sure there are no other problems, particularly in the conduct of this detective.
So does that mean you have reason to believe that there are other cases that weren't followed up on?
Absolutely not. No, this is, as I said, I believe this to be an aberration. I believe that the majority of detectives, every detective in this department, does an incredible job out there. We just have to double check because of what's going on.
So to switch gears for a moment, your name has suddenly surfaced with Janet Napolitano stepping down. Your name has surfaced as a possible replacement for Secretary of Homeland Security. How do you feel about that? Is that something that you'd like to see happen?
Well, as I said when I was asked about this, I'm perfectly happy serving the citizens of Boston. I love this job, and I for the foreseeable future, I intend to continue doing it. That's all speculation right now.
But is it something you feel comfortable that you could do if you do? I mean, everybody says, I'm happy to stay here until I get the call. So if you got the call, is that something you feel comfortable taking, a position you would feel comfortable taking?
Well, that's a very complicated job, and a job that's still evolving. It's a relatively new cabinet position, and it's something that is a difficult job. So I'd have to consider that if in fact it happened, but I'm not going to speculate on it.
Your name also surfaced yesterday in the Boston Globe. You were one of the questions posed to the 12 mayoral candidates about what they would do with you, essentially. Some said that they would love to keep you on as police commissioner. Others declined to answer, and some said that they wouldn't want to keep you on. Do you want to remain Boston police commissioner under a new mayor after November?
Well, I guess that depends on who the mayor is. I certainly love this job, and I'd enjoy working here. I would not want to work for somebody that wasn't satisfied with what I've been doing. But I would certainly consider it. There's some incredible people who are running for mayor that I've worked very closely with over the years that I'd be happy to serve under.
Moving on to the FBI, you've been vocal, as has a number of the members of Congress, including our own Representative Keating, that the FBI should have offered more information about the Tsarnaevs prior to the Boston Marathon bombings. And actually, just before we went on air tonight, we learned that the FBI, in its own internal investigation, says it couldn't have done more. It couldn't have done the proper surveillance that it needed to do in order to understand what their Tsarnaev brothers might have been up to. But do you feel that has anything changed? I mean, does stuff still need to change about what the FBI shares with local authorities, and chiefly you?
Well, I've made my concerns clear at two a House and a Senate hearing. I've told people about what my concerns are, and I had a very productive meeting with Deputy Director Sean Joyce from the FBI at headquarters in Washington just a week ago. And the FBI has already taken steps to correct some things that we raised as an issue. So
such as?
Well, the ability to communicate information back to the department. They've clarified that, and I was very happy with that. And a couple of other operational things that I think, with regard to access to computer systems by the JTTF officers, by the task force officers, that's a step in the right direction. And I'm really excited by the fact that the leadership at the FBI is working very closely with us.
And what about Florida? We still don't know what happened when they were interrogating the person who was presumably, reportedly about to implicate one of the Tsarnaev brothers in the triple murder in Waltham. Would you like to know more information about that?
That's really about a different homicide that I'm not involved in, so I'm the wrong person to ask on that case. It's really not my case. But
it doesn't play into, I mean, in some regard, it might play into everything that you've been investigating and what you oversaw with the Boston Marathon bombings.
Well, that's speculation. There's no indication that that's the case right now, and until I get that information, I would hand that off to the state police.
So a couple other issues we just want to ask about while you're here. Another issue that's come up in the mayoral race is security cameras, and a number of the candidates have expressed interest in having more security cameras. What's the extent of coverage now? And it's obviously something we've paid a lot of attention to after the marathon bombings and knowing how they helped. Just the video images helped.
Right. So we have invested in Homeland security cameras that are along the exit routes to the city so that we could manage an exodus of people from the city. Those actually have played an important role in some criminal investigations because we've picked up activity on those cameras that have helped us in criminal investigations. I think that we need to look at expanding the reach of those cameras into areas that we don't have them now. There are very few in the downtown area. All of the evidence, well, I shouldn't say all of the evidence, but the bulk of the evidence that we reviewed in the Marathon case was from private cameras or video images that were sent in by people with handheld cameras. So I think we probably could do more as far as improving our ability to see things in the downtown area.
And as you want to expand coverage, at the same time, you hear from privacy people who don't want to see security cameras like that. So how much is that something that you feel it's your responsibility to weigh?
Well, my responsibility is to work with the tools that I have. The Supreme Court has made rulings on this in Massachusetts and at the United States Supreme Court, and those are the rules that we operate under. We stay within the bounds of what's constitutionally permissible, and right now videotaping public spaces is constitutionally permissible, and I think it hardens the target. It gives a sense to people who would want to attack us that they might not be able to get away with it. And I know in London, after the bombing of the tube in London, it was government security cameras that caught the evidence that was necessary to prosecute the individuals there. And I think we have to learn a lesson from that.
Do you have a timetable for how and when you'll expand those cameras and the coverage?
No, that's a process that we're looking at right now. But I think there'll be a new mayor in place before there are any hard decisions about where they will be and how much is expended on them.
And finally, on the issue of the shootings, which are up substantially this year, and that's despite efforts that have been employed over the last couple of years about having more people on the ground, about having the devices that can detect the sound waves from shots. How are you addressing the number of shootings escalating?
Right. Well, at the beginning of this week, our homicides were still lower than they were last year at this time. When you look at the crime numbers for the city, we're down 5% in serious crime. So overall, the crime numbers in the city are going in the right direction, the same direction they've been going in for 6 years now. So we're concerned about this upswing in shootings. But we also understand that these things come in clumps and in bunches, and by the end of the year they tend to even out, and we're already seeing that evening out as we go through the summer.
All right. Well, Commissioner Ed Davis, thanks as always for joining us on the program tonight.
Very nice of you. Thank you, Jared.